The Santa Fe National Forest in northern New Mexico is, like many national park lands, a beautiful, pristine wilderness. Flourishing with wildlife, the forest hides sparkling waterfalls and mysterious caves, but also provides the best local recreation. Unfortunately, though, the forest seems to be hiding something else. This is the story of an experienced hunter, familiar with the terrain, who disappeared into the Pecos Wilderness and was never seen again. Join me while we explore the evidence and see if we can figure out what happened to Melvin Nadel. Early September is a bustling and exciting time around Santa Fe. Fiestas are kicking off on the plaza, and the state fair is in full swing down in Albuquerque. However, some northern New Mexicans prefer instead to use the perfect mountainous weather in Pecos to enjoy the last of the summer heat. That's what Melvin Nadel, known to everyone as Mel, his friend Joe, and his brother-in-law decided to do on Sunday, September 6th, 2009. The Elk Mountain area in which Mel and his two companions were camping is one I'm familiar with. I grew up exploring the Pecos Wilderness and continue to do so as an adult. Even without that knowledge, that I'm sure Mel and I both shared, is the awareness of the proximity of civilization. The mountains contain numerous cabins and campgrounds, and if you're high enough up, you can see the glittering lights of Santa Fe in the very near distance. In fact, Elk Mountain is probably about 16 miles from town. He'd been hunting in the Elk Mountain area of Pecos since he moved to New Mexico from New York with Edna in 1991. On a previous trip in this area, Mel had briefly gotten separated from his companions, so he fired his gun and shouted into the forest until he was reunited with them. However, he wasn't one to get lost. That all being said, this Labor Day weekend trip was in a way routine. Around 4:30 that Sunday, Mel's companions headed further into the woods while he decided instead to stay closer to camp and set up a blind, which is basically a hiding place so you don't scare the game away. They agreed to meet at camp before dark, but Mel never showed. In addition to being in an area in which he recognized close to civilization, Mel was also armed, and he was dressed appropriately. He wore a thermal turtleneck, thermal underwear, and thermal socks, a hunting jacket, and boots. And he was carrying his hunting knife, his marten bow with arrows, and his .44 caliber pistol. He was very close to both his wife Edna as well as his daughter Kristen, who he also homeschooled. Mel was a known and loved Santa Fean. He'd previously owned a jewelry store and was planning to open a Pilates studio in late October. Though 61 years old, Mel was in great shape. He was a first-degree black belt in Taekwondo and would be instructor in the new studio opening in October. All of this definitely does not fit the profile of someone who disappeared intentionally to start a new life, for example. Perhaps to prove that, none of the money in Mel's bank accounts had ever been touched. Their camp had been left just as it had when they had last seen it. Mel's companions noticed that his Jeep remained parked, with everything inside, just as he had left it. Camp also showed no sign of a scuffle of any kind. Now, the story is about to get weirder. Just as with most disappearances that happen on federal lands, The official search involving the New Mexico State Police only lasted for just about a week, even though family members and volunteers continued searching for months afterward. Also mirroring the other cases, where very little to no trace of the victims is ever found, nothing of Mel was ever seen again. No shred of clothing, no sign of blood. His weapons were never recovered. Nothing. Yet another, even stranger parallel to the other cases across North America, Mel's disappearance was followed by extremely abnormal weather for the time of year and altitude. As I mentioned earlier, this was Labor Day weekend, the end of summer. But during the search that week, on Wednesday the 9th, there was a heavy snowstorm that hit the Pecos Wilderness, making search efforts even more difficult. To top it all off, the Santa Fe Police Department, who was in possession of a heat-sensing helicopter, claimed it was unavailable at the time. If all this had happened in any old mountainous area, it may not have caught my attention. But Pecos has been a place people have been disappearing into for hundreds of years at the least. The Pecos Pueblo natives idolized a giant snake that reportedly lived in the area. When the Spaniards arrived, the Pueblo people told them to be careful at night around the forest. Bright flashes of brilliant light would be seen, small dancing lights, and strange specters deep in the forest. They named these demonic images El Viverón.
Exactly 4 years ago today, a hunter went missing near Pecos. Search crews never found any sign of 61-year-old Mel Nadel. Action 7 News reporter Regina Reese spoke to his wife, who is still hoping for a clue as to what happened to him.
Literally, I died. My inside, my face, it's like I was like a stone.
Edna Nadel calls it a nightmare, a never-ending nightmare.
Just looking out the window, it's kind of hard. Like, just wondering what happened.
In 2009, Nadel's husband Mel went bow and arrow hunting outside of Pecos and disappeared. Search crews looked for weeks but found no clues. Nadel says she still holds out hope for some closure.
Finding something, a piece of him, a little shred of clothing, a boot, or maybe an arrow, because the bow and arrow never been found. To tell you, I break down, I collapse on the floor.
For Nadel, tragedy taught her about the true meaning of life.
Not to take anything for granted. Life is too short. You always have to live to the fullest and enjoy everything. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Being grateful, even in the face of adversity. Reporting in Santa Fe, Regina Reese, Action 7 News.
If you have any information about Mel Nadel, you can call the New Mexico State Police Department.
Eventually, the news stopped talking about Mel. Most people forgot, but his family didn't. What could have happened out there that strange summer evening? What do you think about the similarities Mel's disappearance has with the hundreds of other national park disappearances?